Everyone, welcome to Fly Safe, a class designed to teach you how to fly safely around Eve space in high sec and low sec. Many of the same rules apply in Null and Wormhole, but there are a few more hazards, so we're not going to be getting into them as such. But first up, I'm Iavatus. I've been flying with the uni for going on 3 years now. I mostly teach and fly incursions these days. I wrote up this class because I noticed a few people getting silly lost medals when they were travelling in low sec. So over the next 60 minutes or so, we're going to be covering travel in all forms, how to travel safely and quickly, the mechanics of warp and alignment, what to do when things go wrong, how to prevent things going wrong with bookmarks, the basic information to give as a scout and to look at, some fitting principles, and lastly how to avoid travel as much as possible, because undocking your ship is when we lose it. If you don't ever undock, you never lose it. At the end there will be a practical showing the various types of bookmarks we've discussed, how to quickly make them, and the mechanics involved in warping. Afterwards there will be a trip into low sec to demonstrate how to safely get around. Both of these are completely optional but highly recommended. I haven't lost anybody yet and don't plan on starting tonight. So first up, what do I mean? What am I talking about when I'm talking about travelling and flying around in space? Well, obviously it's as simple as undocking from your station and warping between the gates, jumping into the gate and going to the next system in our log. So for those of you who are very, very new, one of the quickest and best ways to get around is using bookmarks and set destination and waypoints. So if you need to know how to do this, press Alt-E, which opens up your people and places. Your other method is going in the Neocom menu and clicking on people and places. Go to places, search type, change it to solar system, and type in Aldrat. What this will do is it will show all the systems that are named Aldrat. And then you can click and drag it into a conversation like I just did, and then you can right click on it and set destination or add it as a waypoint. What this will then do is it will show your destination on the top left as your route. For those of you in Aldrat and who want to look along, I just linked Dodixie, and it's the same thing. The various colours mean the security status of the system. As you can, if you mouse over them, you will see that EGFI, for instance, is 0.7, whereas while the blues are 0.9 and the yellows are 0.5s and 0.6, I believe. Anyhow, so that is how we use the route and how we can safely get around to get between systems, how we can navigate to our systems. You can set your destination using such things as links, such as I've demonstrated. If you press Alt-T and open up your Assets tab, it will also show all the places you've got things at, which stations you've got things at, and you can right-click Set Destination there. If you wish to make another stop, you can right-click Add Waypoint. That will add your selected station as a waypoint. All the square means, as opposed to plus sign, is that means to stop, that you're docking at a station, and that will complete that waypoint and then set your next one. So that's pretty much the simplest way of getting around in space, simply using our thing, using our auto route. We will talk about the settings, which you can have a look at if you just click on the A beside it, but they are a little more detailed, so we'll be going into those later. So if anyone wishes to come along to the practical, I'd recommend to get yourself into either Aldrat or Heck, because otherwise we will not be able to facilitate you. So we've got 3 points of information when we undock from our station. We have our overview, our D-scan, and our local. Local is still viewable while we're in station, but our overview is our eyes in Eve, As you should have done by now, you should have set up a few overview tabs. I will just link the overview webpage now, and if you haven't set up your overview, which is one of the standard things you should do when you enter the uni, I'd recommend doing it later on because I prefer your undivided attention. But once you learn how to work it properly, you can do some pretty useful filtering tools for it. But just for this class, we will be using the PvP travel and the pod save. Now, the overview tells us quickly which ships are on grid with us, what distance are from us, if they're yellow boxing or red boxing us. Yellow box means that they're just targeting us. Red box means they're using an aggressive module on us, such as a weaponry system or something such as a stasis web of fire, energy drain, or scrambler. In other words, they aren't our friends at the moment. It also details their speed and velocity in regards to us, their names, the corps, and which alliance they're in. With this information, you can then make informed, useful. You can use this information to make decisions. An interceptor at 120 kilometers burning away from us isn't a threat for some time. One at 40 kilometers burning towards us is. Our D-scan can give us information on anything within 14.4 AU. 1 AU is 150 million kilometers, which is the average, and it's the average distance between the Earth and the Sun. The exception is cloaked ships. They will neither appear on your D-scan or in your overview. Grid is your local arena of space. It is roughly 300 kilometers in diameter. In radius, my apologies. It is possible to burn away and be off grid at roughly 350 to 450 kilometers, and you will thus not show up on the overview of people. You can do some, as I mentioned, the grid itself is in its natural state a rough circle. You can manipulate it and change it into various shapes, so people will appear on grid with you at various distances, or they will not appear on grid with you at very close distances. I've just linked a page, Grid Manipulation, and it details the information that the Goon Swarm uses. It's a very involved subject, and I don't really know enough to get into it. Basically, your on-grid is your overview. Off-grid, you can only see with your D-scan and probes. Now, local is a system-specific chat channel, and it shows us who is in system with us, and their standings to us and the uni. If you are in Aldrat, and if you look at your local now, you can see that there are 9 people in system, and that 5 of them are unistas, and the rest are neutrals. So, which means that they have no standing with the uni, which means they are neither our allies or our enemies, so watch out for them especially. Oh, but one of them's me, so that you don't need to watch out for me as much. But just because somebody is blue does not necessarily mean that they are friendly. It is always a good idea to keep an eye on it, especially for things such as local spikes, which means that a large amount of ships have just come into systems, and what hostiles may be in the system. So are there any questions before we continue on about our overview, D-scan or local? Because as I mentioned, these are our 3 main ways of getting information in the game, and it's kind of important. It's important that I've made it as clear as I can be. My apologies, I meant to ask this at the start of the class, but could everyone just X up if you haven't been in LowSec before and you're intending on coming along on the LowSec trip? Just like a feel for the experience level of the group, basically. Well, 2 new people, that's excellent. That's a good number. Everyone is welcome, but new players will get the most out of this, I believe. So, as you may have noticed, if you fly different sorts of hulls, your ship aligns and warps faster or slower depending on the hull and skills of the pilot. But they also accelerate into and warp faster or slower depending on the hull. ever since the changes from about a year ago now, I believe, Rubicon. This is important to be aware of, as several sorts of ships are much faster than the slower ships, and this means that they can warp to places much quicker. I've just linked a table which demonstrates how fast the various classes of ships warp, even at 10,000 km AU. This is the data gathered from incursion sites, and you jump through an acceleration gate and you warp 10,000 kilometers. As you can see, there is a large difference between the battleships and even the cruisers. There is a significant difference. Also on that page, on a slightly different page, and this is information gathered from, borrowed from Cassio Seraphim, this is a table demonstrating the difference in warp times over multiple AU. And if you have a look at 50 AU is a fairly standard warp, and if you have a look, the battleship will take 69 seconds from starting to align to warping to actually being out of warp, whereas the frigate, for instance, takes 28 seconds. What this means, and interceptors are even faster than this, what this means is that if somebody sees you warping off into a distance to a celestial, such as a planet or a moon or the sun or one of the stations, that they can, if they are in a fast enough ship, that they can be at the celestial before you. And if they have a scrambler, then they can just hold you until the fleet comes in. That is roughly how an interceptor works these days. But the various parts of warp are your aligning, and aligning is when your ship is pointing at a celestial, a bookmark, or a fleet mate and accelerates. When you've aligned fully, this means that you're travelling at least 75% of your top's current speed and are pointing at the direction of, say, the Aldrat or the Eggfeet Gate, if you're in Aldrat. This is your aligning speed is affected by your inertia modifier. There are several mods that affect your inertia modifier, such as the nanofiber structures and inertia stabilizers. These give bonuses, and as far as rigs go, you have your low friction nozzle joints. Armor plates negatively affected, which increases your alignment time. What this means is that an armor tank, as opposed to a shield tank, armor tanked Hurricane, for example, will take longer to align and get into warp than that's a shield tanked Hurricane. However, there is one important thing, is if, as I mentioned, you only actually start warping when you're at 75% of your current top speed. If you have been webbed, this means that your current top speed has been drastically reduced, which can oftentimes, if you haven't been scrammed, can punch you into warp immediately. People who fly freighters on a regular basis will oftentimes use an alt to web the freighter so that it gets into warp that much quicker, because freighters aren't very fast. So if you have aligned to a celestial and are travelling at the correct speed to be able to warp, this means you can warp without delay, which is highly useful in fleet fights or in missioning. Leaving the field can prevent a stupid boss mount. However, as I demonstrated at the start of this section, if somebody can seize what you're aligned to, they can easily set a trap for you at the celestial. The way that we prevent landing in this trap is the use of bookmarks. So are there any questions about warp speeds and alignment before we continue on to discussing bookmarks? Okay. So bookmarks. Bookmarks are a tool that we use they save the X, Y, Z coordinates of our interspace into our own people and places. We can transfer these to other people. We can warp to them, obviously. We can warp at a distance to them, which can be useful sometimes, and we can warp fleet mates and other people. We can warp fleet mates to them. We can also use them for various utilities, and we're going to be covering that. So as the server updates information in ticks as opposed to real time. This saves a lot of crunching on CCP's side. But what this means is that ships will warp a certain distance per tick, depending on their own warp speed. If you are thus warping between two celestials, such as the Aldrat Petatext Station and Egfi Gate, this means that you are warping in a straight line, and you will warping at the same speed, at very similar speed to other people, and that they can drop bookmarks and be at and using DScan can easily find out where you are roughly and warp to a bookmark that they have of that same warp. So from a best practice viewpoint, this is unacceptable. But there are various ways that we can prevent this, and that is simply by, as opposed to using aligned bookmarks, is setting up unaligned bookmarks. So to set up an aligned safe spot is you simply warp between two celestials, you drop bookmarks at a location you desire, and if you press F10 and you open up the system map, you will be able to see yourself in space. And if you go into the options, by default, bookmarks should be visible. So if you have bookmarks in the system you are in, you will be able to see where they are roughly. So there are various you have your choice of when you want to drop a bookmark. And if you open up people and places and click on add location, this will open up a little window, and it won't actually save a bookmark until you actually click on submit. And again, because there is server delay and it operates in ticks, this means that it won't drop the bookmark the second you press submit. However, with a bit of practice, you can learn where and when it will start dropping these bookmarks. So you have your choice. You can drop it in the middle of, if you are setting up an aligned safe spot, you can drop it in the middle of the warp. You can drop it just at the beginning, so you're still off grid with the out Petatext station, or you can drop it at the end when you're very close to the Egfi Gate. These all have their various uses, and we'll be covering those in a minute. However, so you set up one aligned safe spot. Excellent, that's great. People can find you quite easily because they will be able to see where you've come from, where you're going, and they will be able to open up DScan and find what distance you are from the station. They cannot warp to you from that, but they can easily either drop probes on short-range scan, find you and quickly withdraw the probes. Don't see them on DScan, and you do see combat probes on DScan, but a good scanner will not have them out for very long. Or if they've already got bookmarks to roughly that area, they may warp to that bookmark and hope for the best. But their method of making an unaligned safe spot is quite simple. Is if, for instance, we warp. So if we warp between Aldrat and Egfi Gate and drop a bookmark there, and then we warp between the Sun and some other celestial, such as Planet 7, and we drop another bookmark there. I really do need to make pictures of this. But if we drop another bookmark between those two celestials, now we've got two aligned bookmarks. And then if you warp between those two aligned bookmarks, however, and you drop another bookmark, a third bookmark in the middle of that warp, congratulations, you've just got an unaligned bookmark and are fairly safe from being quickly scanned or probed down. However, there is one thing. As I mentioned, the DScan has a range of 14.4 AU. If you get a safe spot that is outside of 14 AU away from any celestials, this makes it take a lot longer for a prober to find you just on DScan and probe you down. It just makes it that much harder for them. However, if you do not have the celestial for some reason you do not feel like warping between two celestials and making your aligned bookmarks and then your unaligned of them, you've got another method, and that is simply with security mission spots. If you, hopefully most of you have done a few security missions by now, you walk to a security mission and you drop a bookmark, you will notice that they are roughly within 4 AU of a planet. However, they will oftentimes be out of any alignment because they are just randomly generated. So simply, if you want to quickly make some, you can have a conversation with a security agent in that system. You don't even need to accept the mission, and you just warp to the mission pocket and bookmark it there. Your other a much better method for getting good, safe bookmarks is with incursion systems. Incursion bookmarks, and I will demonstrate some of these on the practical, are between 50 and 100 AU away from the center of the system. This means you can easily get some good safe spots. However, as the incursion beacons are visible to everyone and quite easily bookmarkable, it's a good place to start a safe spot from, but it is not a good place to use as a safe spot all the time. So I've covered one of the most important uses for bookmarks, and that is making us some safe spots. Now, we just use safe spots if we need to warp to somewhere that's not select. If we're in combat, for instance, and we need to warp a fleet and we're losing, and we need to warp the fleet away. If we warp to a celestial, there's a good chance that we'll have a few interceptors waiting for us. However, if we warp to a safe spot, then we are, by the name of it, fairly safe. So that's one of the main uses of safe spots. And if you're just traveling by yourself, you can make yourself a spot wherever you like and just bounce to it if there's ever problems. However, some of the other uses of bookmarks are your off-grid bookmarks, which you just, when you're in warp to a celestial, for instance, you just drop a bookmark when you're under an AU, from 1 AU away from the celestial, and your ship is slowing down in warp speed, and you can bounce to that and quickly check it on D-scan. What you can then do with D-scan is see who's in system and if there's anybody at the celestial. This is useful for things such as bouncing to a gate and just seeing if somebody's there. You can also use this in combat situations. If you want to be able to quickly escape from combat, but then get back in. For instance, I used to fly a lot of E-War, specifically Blackbirds, so ECM. What this meant was that in fleet fights I would get targeted a lot, so I would have myself aligned to this bookmark, and I'd be able to warp to it quickly, wait a few seconds, and then warp to either a fleet mate, somebody still on grid, and then start aligning to the bookmark again. This means I was out of the combat for the minimum amount of time and could get some good scrams off and annoy people a lot. So I've already mentioned deep space safe. You've got your instant undocks. Instant undocks take a little more time to make up, but all they simply are is you undock yourself. The reason you're making an instant undock is if you are traveling to, say, if you are going to get camped into the station, or if you're traveling to market hubs and you don't want to get targeted by pirates. All you simply do is you undock yourself. This allows you to quickly get out of the station without being targetable often. So what you do is you undock from the station in a fast frigate, preferably with a micro warp drive. You undock, wait until you'll be traveling in a straight line from the undocked station, funnily enough, and you activate your micro warp drive and you just wait for however long. It's got to be more than 150 AU, as you can only warp more than 150 kilometers or more. However, if it's 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers, that's not bad either. And then once you've saved yourself, dropped a bookmark, you can then redock in the station and then undock in your expensive ship, warp to that bookmark, and you will almost instantly warp to it. This is because when you undock from a station, you are traveling in a roughly the same angle. There's about a 15-degree variance, so there may be a slight align change, but you're already traveling at full speed, so it means you will simply instantly warp to your bookmark. So that's the use of instant undocks, especially in stations like Jita 44, which is called a kick-out station, because when you undock, you are no longer within the docking ring of the station. So you can't simply stop movement, wait until your undock timer has phased out, and then redock at the station. You do not have that option. And the event, when you undock, you have a 30-second timer where you are untargetable, and I'm not sure if you're invincible to area effect weapons such as smart bombs, but I don't think you are. You are untargetable until you move, such as starting to align to a bookmark that is not an instant undock. So one of the final uses for bookmarks is observation bookmarks. I covered a little of this in your off-grid bookmarks, but this is for a bookmark that is still on grid with a celestial, such as the Egg-Fee Gate. It's generally more than 200 kilometers away, and what you can do with this is you can be quite far away from the gate, so you're not able to be targeted or tackled. That means you can quite easily see what's at the gate, and you can then bounce to the gate and walk through, or if that's not a viable option, you can then walk back to wherever you wish. What this does is it gives you options, and options are always a good thing. So are there any questions about bookmarks? It's a fairly in-depth topic, and it's quite useful to get a lot of practice into it, because they will save you. If you have a look at Seamus's information, especially his title as the safest man in Eve, he got that title from a CCP note when they changed bookmarks quite a while ago now, but you used to be able to have as many bookmarks as you wished, and Seamus had in excess of 17,000 bookmarks, just from various things, missioning, undocking, all sorts of things. So when it was brought to CCP's attention that he had so many, that he was called the safest man in Eve, simply because he had so many, because it gives him lots of options and ways of getting around in space. So that's the basics of bookmarks, and we'll be covering them in the practical, but there are all sorts of things you can do with them. For instance, if you've got several bookmarks on the same bookmarks around this text station, for instance, you can easily warp between them, which means that it makes it a lot more difficult for you to be tackled. You can then warp to your bookmark and then shoot, and then if the situation is getting a bit dicey, you can then walk back to the station and dock up. Pirates, especially in Heck, have been known to play these sorts of games, and occasionally they will also get somebody who has watched them for long enough and has noticed where their bookmarks are, has bookmarked them and waited until they start warping to them, and then met them there and blew them up, and it was glorious. So by using bookmarks as thoroughly as we can, we minimize the risks of people knowing where we are, what we're doing, and what we're flying. For instance, if everyone could set the station I've just linked as their destination, and if you're in Aldrat and it should be, by default, it should be at Prefer Safer, it will take 24 jumps. If, however, you know what you're doing, and if you click on the A and click on Prefer Shorter, it will change to 14 jumps. And especially if you have a look at the red and orangey colours, you'll see that they are the low-sec systems. This is what's called a low-sec pipeline. As I just mentioned, it shaves 10 jumps off the pipeline, 10 jumps off the trip, which can save a bit of time. But pirates will lurk in Rancer and wait for people to come through and blow them up with their smart bombing ships. So if you're travelling in a fast frigate, and if you are just warping between the gates, people can and will set up smart bombing battleships to blow up your ship and your pod. So I'll talk about the auto route and its settings just quickly. Again, if you go to route and if you click on the A on the side, that's where you open up the options. Generally, you should have it always at Prefer Safer, unless you know what you're doing. There are other options I wouldn't worry too much about. Prefer Less Secure, that's for when you're more travelling in a combat fleet and looking for fights. So you're quite happy to stroll around in low-sec systems. Avoid systems where pod killing has recently occurred, that's kind of self-explanatory. Avoid systems on your avoidance list. Now, if you right-click on one of the systems and then avoid it, and Rancer is not a bad idea to have on your avoidance system, unless you know what you're doing, then you can toggle whether it's being avoided at the moment or not. If you want to remove a system from your avoidance list, you have to go down to the bottom, click on Manage Route, and Avoidance List will be there. The systems that you have avoided will be there. And I can never remember if I deliberately avoided GTAB because it was funny or not. So that's a bit more about the auto route and how to use it. I'm going to talk about wormholes quickly, but are there any questions about anything I've covered so far? I'm more than welcome to take any. So wormholes are a slightly different form of travel in that they are essentially null-sec system space. They have no gates and no local. What this means is that if you get yourself into a wormhole, a signature, and then enter the actual wormhole itself. But the first thing to do when you enter into a wormhole system is to bookmark current location, simply so that, worst case, your ship does blow up and you can't scan your way out, you can still warp to the bookmark and get your pod out. The other thing is it has no local, or local doesn't update unless you speak into it. What this means is that you cannot tell who is in system with you and if anyone is online when you actually warp yourself to a well, and you're quite safe if you just warp to the wormhole without actually entering into it. You can just warp to it and then look at its info and then compare it to that text in the page I just linked. It will tell you how much life and how much time it has before it collapses and how much mass it has used before it would collapse. What this means that you can tell if the wormhole is going to simply collapse within the hour or so, and if it will collapse pretty much as soon as you enter. So these are good things to check out before you actually enter and you get yourself trapped. So once you've entered and you've made your bookmark, people do live in wormholes, and they have truly impressive amounts of bookmarks, safe spots, and essentially quite a few POSs, most likely, which is a player-owned station. No, I can't remember what it stands for, but we've got our own POS. We use it for research and a bit of safety and mining, and essentially these are things that wormhole residents can use it for, but they also get quite a bit of blue loot from the sleeper NPCs who live in there as well, and all the missions that run, essentially missions. So, but the other thing to remember about wormhole space is, because it's essentially nullsec, is it does have warp bubbles, which are large fields that if you're in warp between them and it catches you, it will pull you out of warp, pull you pretty much to the center of it, and have you scrammed, so you're essentially being tackled. So if somebody wishes, if there's somebody on grid, that they can easily shoot you down while you're trying to get yourself out. They will also be tackled, but they may have chosen to be there. So any questions about wormholes? Because the next topic is dealing with gate camps. So I've told you the dynamics and mechanics of travelling. So how you align, warp, how to use bookmarks, some of the things you can do with bookmarks, and some of the reasons to use bookmarks as often as you can. But now we're going to be talking about gate camps. Now, obviously, by the name of it, a gate camp is essentially a bunch of ships who lurk around a gate and wait for people to jump through. Now, there are a few things that they can do to catch people. Obviously, first up, some of the ships will be in fast tackle ships. So as soon as you jump through, you have a minute of cloak. What they're relying on is you panicking and warping or moving or doing something stupid, and so that they can then tackle you and hold you for the rest of the fleet to shoot you down. However, what you can do, quite simply, is wait for a bit and take a deep breath. Because when you jump through a gate, you have 1 minute of invisibility cloak and 30 seconds of invulnerability cloak. After those 30 seconds, you can be smart bombed, but you still are invisible until you move, and thus you cannot actually be targeted or shot. So that's your first thing you should be paying attention to when you find yourself a gate camp, is look at the composition of the fleet and see what they've got and how far away they are from you. And also what ship you're in. If you're in a frigate, you have both options are really quite open to you. Is that you can either warp to a celestial and then bounce to another one, or to one of your own bookmarks, and hopefully you've got some bookmarks already made up. Your other option is to burn back to the gate and jump. If you've got a micro warp drive, you can quite easily be there within 10 seconds and start spamming the gate jump after you've waited for your gate timer to give out with your invisibility cloak. So that's your options if you're in a frigate and there's not a huge amount of people looking at you. If, however, you're in something bigger, such as a battle cruiser or a battleship, burning back to the gate may be your only option, simply because you will not be able to align and warp in time before they get off some scrams onto you, because it can take 5-10 seconds for a battleship to be within time, to be starting to align off. So then your option is again to burn back to the gate and jump through. However, anyone who has shot you has gate timers, which means that they cannot jump through for a full minute. But let's say that you're part of a fleet and you actually crash the gate deliberately. What you need to do then is take a deep breath and open up your D-scan is one of your best options. D-scan, do a short range scan and have a look at what ships are on grid and what type of ship they are as well, and the names and the rough composition. So then relay this information back to your FC, who hopefully has his fleet on the other side of the gate. Then what you do is you have to tell him that there are, for instance, 3 frigates, 4 drakes, and logistics support. This gives him all the information he needs, and he can easily act on that information. There is no point in that there's a frigate, Drake. It's very tiresome to hear. Your job then is to be a filter to give him the information quickly, and just saying the types of ships doesn't give him the information quickly. So unfortunately there isn't much more you can do when you've had a look at this. Is Your only options really are to warp away and to burn away. Of course, if you have a scout, then your options are to send scout in to find out the information. And with an experienced scout, they should be able to defeat most gate camps unless they have an instant lock gate camp. But even so, they have a lot of options that they can work with. If, however, you are the scout and you didn't wish to find this gate camp, then best of luck and start warping yourself back. When if your ship does explode, keep spamming warp to your bookmark, because that will get your pod out. That's a drag, but if you lose your pod as well, that's something that's far easier to avoid. If you don't have bookmarks, use your pod saver tab. It's not perfect, but it's a good starting point for your travels, for your escape plan. So are there any questions about gate camps and how you prevent them, how you deal with them, before we continue on to preventing finding them? Ray just asks, doesn't D-scan get you out of invisibility? No, you can use your D-scan. That's about the only thing you can do. You can look at who's in. That's the other thing you can do. You can look at who's in local and who's on your overview, and you can look at your D-scan. You can't activate any modules. It won't let you use any modules. The only way you start breaking your gate cloak is if you actually start moving. That's how we deal with gate camps, and there's not much to it, unfortunately. However, I've always thought it's the best place is to prevent problems before they arise. So we've discussed how we use our auto route. We've commented a little on using the Eve map. However, there's an out-of-game tool that uses in-game information and is far more monitor-friendly, and that is Eve Maps, or .lan. Now, if you click on the link that I just linked, and you will notice that that's a map of the Metropolis region. And as you can see, we have Aldrat in roughly the middle. You can open this in an out-of-game browser or an in-game browser. If you do use your in-game browser, it has access to a little more information. You can use it to set up routes and things, but I prefer to use the out-of-game browser simply so I can use my second monitor for it. So if you have a look at Aldrat, which is roughly in the middle, and if you have a look to the left and just straight to the left, and you will see a system called Dudrader. Aldrat is obviously the headquarters system for Eve Uni. Can anyone tell me why the low-sec camp used to be set up in Dudrader as well? And they have several similar characteristics. Smalis gets it. They are both pipeline systems. And again, if you have a look at Dudrader or Hagula even, all those systems there are low-sec systems. However, if you controlled Hagula, then you have all the systems behind it in Dudrader, Kreerold, Arafseld, Anson, Awa, and Hakisaki. Hakisalk, I forget. That is part of the same reason that we use Aldrat. It's high-sec, so we don't exactly have the same degree of pirates and ne'er-do-wells, but we still have the back-pocket systems, such as the Liebold frigate free-for-all, and it allows us to have various things in a degree of safety. So that's one of the uses of .lan, is we can see what's around us and find out information. However, if you also click on individual systems, such as if you click on the Hadoziko system, which if you have a look is down below Dudrader and to the left a bit more, and it gives you a lot of information about the system itself. So, and this is all information grabbed from the in-game system. Again, if you press F10 and if you go to Star Map, and it's all the same, the information is there. You can find it if you wish. However, .lan isn't as pretty, but it is far more functional. And when it comes to blowing up things in space, function does win some of the time. So we've got the information of the ship kills and the pod kills, and those are two of the more important ones. What this tells us is that if you have a look at the ship kills, for instance, that there's a peak of about 7 ship kills 36 hours ago, and then it peaked at 12 hours ago. This tells me that period of time, that in another 12 hours there might be another peak of ship kills, simply because there's a lot of people active and travelling through the system. However, on the right there's also the pod kills, and that's a lot more useful. This means that people have been pod killing and only players pod kill, NPCs do not. So quite simply, this means that it's not an incredibly busy pirate system, but it has enough pirates to make it not a great place if you're in a hauler, for instance. So that's some of the information we can get just straight from .land. So if you are interested in scouting, and if you open up .land, you can easily check the systems around you to see roughly how much activity there has been in there. So as a scout, if you're travelling in low-sec, there's a few things you can do. First up, if you're in a fast frigate, these are some scout frigates that I made up quite a while ago. And if you have a look at any of them, they're all roughly the same. They have a cloak, they have a micro warp drive, and they have gravity capacitor upgrade. Now, what this allows even a very, very new pilot to do is to use the cloak and be able to be a picket and just watch gates. With the prototype cloak, you cannot. If you open this information, and you will see that when the cloak is active, you have a 90% velocity modifier, and when you're cloaked, you cannot use the micro warp drive. So this means that if you are cloaked, you will not be able to move very fast around the gate or whatever celestial. But that's not what the cloak is really for. The cloak is there to keep you invisible and let you wait around in the system and quite safely. The probe launcher is, if you have a look at the information, then go to the description tab. You can launch your core scanner probes and scan down cosmic signature, and your combat scanner probes allow you to scan down ships, structures and drones. So this is quite simply if you are in a fleet and the FC wants to find a fight, then you can use your probes to find in that fight. The micro warp drive is if you wish to make your bookmarks, your off-grid bookmarks, or your undocked bookmarks quickly. It gives you a lot more speed to do that. And the gravity capacitor upgrade simply gives you extra probe strength, because with a ship like this, you may not have the best skills for probing, and you need everything you get. The last feature is the Hornet ECM drones. If you do get tackled or targeted and you cannot get away quickly, if you are targeting them at the same time and you launch your drones and get them to attack, then you may be lucky and get a scram off, which may save your probe. But at the same time, this thing costs about 2 million ISK. It's not very expensive, and you can get a lot of use out of it. So if you're trawling around in low-sec and you wish to find a fight, your main methods are if you dock in the stations, see if people are docked there. If you walk between the faction warfare beacons and see if people are there, and asteroid belts, near planets. It's not very complicated, it just takes a bit of practice. So that's mostly the low-sec part of the class covered. I'm going to be talking a bit more about how to travel around high-sec safely now. Essentially, traveling around high-sec is, for the most part, very, very boring and safe. Simply because unless you are carrying a lot of ISK, a lot of expensive modules or expensive things, and don't have much tank, it will be very boring because you are not a profitable gank target. And that's a good thing, because there's nothing more satisfying than being an unuseful gank target. When people are in a gank mode and they are looking for people to gank, all they'll be doing is looking at your ship, looking at your ship's module layout fitting, and seeing how much tank you've got. If you have, say, 3 large shield extenders and some armor plates on, this means that unless you're carrying a lot of expensive things, you are not worth the time. So essentially, fit buffer tank. Do not worry about active reps or things. A gank target. A ganker only has, what is it, about half a minute to a minute before Concord arrives and blows them up. Your active reps will not add a great deal more to your effective hit points. So that's your basic fitting principle, is to fit buffer. So that's how to safely get around HiSec. The other thing is minimizing your travel as much as possible. Simply put, again, as I mentioned, traveling around space is quite boring, and unless you're doing it wrong, is quite useless. So what you've got to do is think about what you're traveling for. For instance, as I mentioned at the start, I incursion, which means that I fly expensive ships in very spread out all throughout space. Now, I had entirely too much ISK, so I went around and I bought a copy of my ship and placed it in every section of Empire space. What this means is that when I wish to do an incursion, I fly a fast scout ship. I fly that ship to between the beacons to the closest of my logistics ships, and then it may be only 5 jumps to the incursion site itself. So by expenditure of a bit of time and ISK, I minimize risk of traveling greatly. Same when I'm doing missioning. I know that I mission in certain areas, so I have a mission ship that just lives out there, and when I do other things, I just travel in my fast ships to there. Your other method is using courier contracts. Quite simply, this is one of the safest ways, is just setting up a courier contract and getting somebody else to haul it. Definitely set up a collateral that is worth more than your ships, more than whatever you're hauling, simply because if it's less, then there is no good reason for them to actually haul, rather than just breaking the contract and making a decent profit for absolutely no effort. I just linked Red Frog, which is a dedicated transport service, and if you have a look, they are roughly, I think it's 500,000 ISK per jump. However, that's hauling 780,000 cubic meters of goods. This means that you can quite easily fit a battleship and a cruiser fitted and rigged up, or if they're flat packed, so if they're already packaged up, so they don't have rigs in them, you can quite easily fit 4 or 5 battleships. So that's just one of the methods of minimizing your own personal risk and outsourcing it to somebody else. They can be expensive at 500,000 per jump, but it can be quite worthwhile, worth the time and expenditure. So I think I've covered pretty much everything I wish to cover. Are there any questions? Because otherwise we'll get started on the practical in a few minutes. Alright, well, thank you everyone for attending. I hope it's been informative and useful. I hope you get a lot of use out of it. But I've just linked the fleet invite. So if you wish to join up, we'll get started. As I mentioned, we'll get started in a few minutes. But everyone, fly safe and have fun.